welcome back to another video. I am your host, the OT Astartes. Now, welcome back to another review, folks. So, we're not reviewing the next step anymore because I decided to not go with that option. I was originally going to review seasons 1 to 5 and then 7 and 8 and the other things that went on during the pandemic. But then I thought to myself, nah, I want to move on to something different. So I was left with two options. It was either Wolfblood or a little show called Hetty Feather. I decided to go with Hetty Feather instead. So in this series, I'm going to review the entirety of Hetty Feather. Now, I have made a spelling mistake within this week's thumbnail. So I apologize for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly edit it out. So I'll just go to share screen. First of all, before we do anything, there are a few housekeeping things. So number one, I'll be away on the last week of July and first week of August. It's also the week of Ring of Honor Death Before Dishonor, which is my pay-per-view. Well, my version of Ring of Honor. It's summer pay-per-view on that week. So I'm going to concentrate more on Ring of Honor because there's a lot leading up to that. A lot of stuff to do afterwards as well. Number two, Gallifrey Falls. So earlier last week even, I had to do a complete reset of my laptop. So that meant my animation studio was uninstalled. Luckily, I did take some precautions by putting it in a separate folder and exporting the video of Act 1 because Act 3, sorry, because I do it in 3 separate acts. So I did that, and I've got a new version of my animation studio, and I did some filming this morning. Third of all, I'm trying to get to 200 subscribers as soon as possible because I've got a big video planned for when I get 200 subscribers. So I don't ask people to subscribe, but if you do want to subscribe, then subscribe away. You know, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, comment what you think, and let's get into this show now. For those who don't know, I'm going to go through a quick explainer. So Hetty Feather was a book by Jacqueline Wilson about a foundling girl who lived a life in the foundling hospital. Now, they turned it into a TV show in 2015 about an older Hetty because we had a younger Hetty in the novel, I believe. I had the novel, but I didn't read it. So it was one of the series that I loved watching when I was in my early teenage years. So this was 2015, we're talking. So then we're gonna review 2 episodes at one time, 2 episodes per video. So here's this week's thumbnail, just to let you guys who are unaware of what this is. Just to let you know that that's a Space Marine from something called Warhammer 40k. So, now, I'm going to edit this. So, there we go. So, let's go to our Space Marine quote of the video. So we go from reviewing a dance show to this. And I'd say if they think the foundling hospital is bad, then they should try out an average day in the 41st millennium. 41st millennium is when Warhammer 40k is set, by the way. Yeah, no one would survive in 40k. In fact, there are no safe places in Warhammer. I'd love to see what this generation would say in Warhammer. Bearing in mind, half of them worship chaos. Right, so our setting is 1877, and we begin with Hetty writing a diary And we also get a flashback to Hetty and her borrowed brother Gideon running in fields of gold. So they are being taken to the Foundling Hospital by their borrowed mother and borrowed brother Jem. And we are introduced to Matron Bottomley. Oh, Matron! God bless, carry on. And she is played by Eva Pope. Now, for those of you who are unaware of Eva Pope's work, she was in a show called Waterloo Road, but she's also lended her voice to a few audio dramas here and there, and one of those is an episode of Doctor Who, or a story of Doctor Who, simply called Army of Death. So, it's with the 8th Doctor, my favourite incarnation of Doctor Who, by the way. And it features Julie Cox as Mary Shelley, David Harewood as a politician, and Carolyn Pickles. So then Eva Pope plays a convicted assassin. So very different to Matron Bottomley. I love how Big Finish used to have the time vortex in their discs. And then we have a little diary entry style booklet. I miss when Big Finish put effort into their work. Look, they've even got an undead army. Pre-Game of Thrones White Walkers. So there's a behind-the-scenes picture here of some of the casts. So Eva Pope is on the left, Julie Cox is on the right. Eva Pope and Julie Cox. She looks different blonde. This was in 2011, so pre-Dark Eyes, Big Finish, when everything changed for the 8th Doctor. So this was post Lucy Miller. Well, this was set at the beginning of the 8th Doctor's time in the TARDIS, so after the movie, but this was released before Dark Eyes and after Lucy Miller's demise into the death, who was played by Sheridan Smith. So then at the beginning, Matron Bottomley states that the Foundling Hospital is a place of charity. And then behind closed doors, she's a very strict woman. So then we also meet Mr. Cranbourne, who's very different to Matron. I mean, he's firm but fair. And then Cranbourne separates Gideon and Hetty because the boys and girls are both separate. And then we go to our opening title sequence. So the opening theme, it's got a charming and childlike sound to it because it sounds very light-hearted and cheeky and fun, but it's very different to what the show is, that some of the themes of the show, because some of it's about how cruel Matron Bottomley could be. The opening titles, they're quite clever because it features a montage of what goes on in the Foundling Hospital and what the life of Foundling looks like. The logo is very similar to the style of the 19th century, and throughout the title sequences, we see eventually the lines write out the words Hetty Feather. So post titles, we have a montage of initiation. So Hetty's hair was cut, and then her clothes are burnt, as is her doll. So now she is initiated. And then Hetty misbehaves. Matron chucks Hetty Feather into a place called the Tench. Basically, the Tench is the naughty corner for children, but stricter. It must have been an old disused part of the hospital. So then we go to 5 years later, and we meet Hetty and her friends, Polly, Harriet, and Mary. Now, the actor who plays Polly was also in The Irregulars. Now, I do have to admit, when I first saw in The Irregulars, I was like, hold on, Shearer and Hetty Feather. Bloody hell, Polly's life's gone a bit downhill since she left the Foundling Hospital. We cut to Hetty taking out the laundry, and she crosses paths with Sheila and her she-mob, as she calls them. So one of them's called Monica, and I don't know who the other one was called. Then while she's doing the laundry, Hetty faints, and it turns out to be influenza as she's taken into the infirmary. The influenza spreads very quickly, or I've put here, Papa Nurgle's blessings spread quickly. There's a lot of Warhammer references on this channel. If ever I review something, you'll always have a Warhammer 40k reference. So anywho, the influenza spreads quickly and the place goes into lockdown. Just like 2020 then. So then the boys hear about it while they're on the military parade, because boys are taught to be more like soldiers, whereas girls are more taught to be like maids. So they are called in because of the influenza. And then as it goes on, Hetty's flu gets worse. And the boys see this as an opportunity to escape and to go to the sea for an opportunity at life, because anything's better than a Foundling Hospital. Then Hetty gets childhood flashbacks as she has a sort of dream sequence and she wakes up. So then we have Nurse Winterston, who is caring and thoughtful. Her and Cranbourne are very different people to Matron Bottomley and Nurse Macclesfield. Hetty then worries about Gideon, and then she is well enough to go back to the girls' dormitories. And Sheila makes a joke that she could spread influenza. Then Hetty makes a vow to find Gideon, and while she's cleaning, she spots a ladder. She takes the opportunity to climb up this ladder, just to explore what the other parts of the Foundling Hospital are like. She ends up somewhere else, and she meets Matthias. Then she finds a letter that Matthias has written to make it seem as though it's from Matron Bottomley, but really Matthias wrote it. Hetty taunts Matthias with it, and he tells her that he wants to get out of the Foundling Hospital. Sheila notices that Hetty's gone missing, and she interrogates her friend Mary, I think. Poor Mary gets a lot of interrogation in this, mainly because she is the most vulnerable of them, I'd say. So Matthias gives a rundown of the escape plan to Hetty. Hetty advises that she writes the letter instead to make it sound more convincing. But they make a deal. She rewrites the letter on the condition that Matthias brings Gideon with him. And then, while Hetty's away, Matron shows up looking for her. Just as she's at the end of the corridor, Hetty climbs down. Then Cranbourne counts his troops, and then Gideon and co decide to run off. During lunchtime, Polly advises against Hetty's plan, and then Sheila comes in and triggers Hetty. And there's a food fight. More dramatic than the one on the next step, with more dire consequences. As punishment, Hetty is taken to the Tench and therefore does not show up to give Matthias the letter that she rewrote. We move on to episode 2. So Matthias and Gideon are both down because Hetty didn't show up, and they decide to give up. Then Matron comes in to free Hetty and says, "I hope you had a nice long think in there, Feather." She then goes back to doing laundry, and she dresses up as a boy and then decides to look for Matthias and Gideon and co. She avoids getting spotted by Cranbourne and then talks to Gideon again, and they both agree to escape. And Gideon tells Matthias that the escape is back on. And I also forgot to mention that they've got friends too, Walter and Ned. Then Matthias gets the letter that Hetty wrote, and then Gideon asks that Hetty joins the escapees as well. And he accepts. So then when it becomes the night, Hetty and Sheila, just as they go to bed, Sheila warns Hetty not to cross her again, and the escape gets underway. Both parties avoid the watchman and then eventually meet up. Sheila, however, wakes up in the middle of the night and notices that Hetty's bed is empty. Her mob decides to interrogate Mary. Poor Mary. I feel sorry for her because she always gets targeted by Sheila, and she quickly confesses. The fugitives go to the exit, and just as they're about to leave, they come into the walled garden. Sheila decides to warn Matron, and the escapees have to climb a wall. And meanwhile, Sheila decides to go and warn Matron. Matron then sounds the alarm, and Cranbourne comes to help. And I love how Cranbourne is wearing a nightcap and a nightgown. There was a song from folklore called Wee Willie Winkie. So Wee Willie Winkie runs through the town in his nightgown and his nightcap. I forgot how the rest of it goes. So Matron decides to sound the alarm, and Cranbourne comes to help. Gideon back at the wall, Gideon fails to make it and falls down. There is the sequence where it switches between people climbing over the wall and Matron Bottomley tracking them down. Hetty decides to stay with Gideon while the others go. Cranbourne patrols the boys' dormitory and he sees that some beds are empty. And then when Matron checks out the girls' dormitory, she finds that Hetty is back in bed, and she's convinced that nothing happened at all, and she thinks that Sheila made it up to lie to her and raise the alarm for nothing. So the next day, she punishes Sheila and her friends by cutting their hair. Towards the end, so the next day, Colonel visits the hospital and he disapproves of what's been going on recently with the escape. And then we end the episode with Matron Bottomley gathering all the foundlings in the hospital in the chapel, announcing that there will be stricter rules, and she's tightening things up around the hospital because of what happened with Matthias. So that just about wraps up the first two episodes. A kind of decent start to the show, I think. A nice introduction. I like how we have level staff members, so people can't stand Matron Bottomley and Nurse Macclesfield, but Winterston and Cranbourne, people start to drift more towards Cranbourne later on in the show, but this sets them up as slightly different to Matron. Ooh, Matron! I like how they made Matron Bottomley the strictest woman ever. I think it was a good move having Eva Pope. I think she's a good actor. You know, she's good at playing a strict head. You know, she runs a tight ship. Story-wise, I will say it's good to have a few historical facts in there because there were no vaccines in the Victorian age. Influenza diseases were much worse in the Victorian era. You know, if you caught it, you were going to die. Luckily, Hetty managed to survive. And I think the casting in this was brilliant because the actors, they definitely improved with the show, I'd say. I think everyone improved as the show went on. So yeah, one of my favorite shows that I watched in my early teenage years. Um, so yeah, I think I look forward to reviewing more of this show as it goes on and catching some memories as well from when CBBC was good. Well, it started to go bad in 2016, if I'm honest, but from the last good year of CBBC. And I'll also say, I remember Isabel Clifton and Matthew Ashford, so Cranbourne and Hetty, going on Hacker Time. And that's one of my favorite episodes because I miss Hacker Time so much. And I still remember watching it. It's a shame that they haven't got Hacker Time on iPlayer, because Hacker Time was a show like no other. I'd like to thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. So goodbye and good night.